Welcome to Saturday in Real Love Guitars. I'm Sam. This is the massive workshop, getting even more cluttered at the moment. But anyway, so by popular demand, I have switched off the twinkling Christmas light. Never knew it could upset people so much, but anyway, don't need them on, so they're off. I've also shut the door so that there isn't a big white hole of light over there. Anyway, onwards and upwards. What we've got here is one of James's two guitars. We've got a couple of them come down for setup. This one, both of them are Squiers, and this one is the Squier Affnity Strat. And in a way, it's really good to see one of these again for the first time in quite some time. This is your absolutely bog standard Affnity Strat by the looks of it. Is it made in Indonesia? Yeah, made in Indonesia version. You know, well built, really great neck on it, pretty good pickups, fairly light body. I don't know what these all exactly were, agathis or something. Yeah, fairly light thing, and you know, with a sort of 70s CBS style headstock on it, big headstock, sealed tuners, skunk stripe on the back, and in many ways better than the most basic of the Squier Strats, so not a bad guitar. And in this case, everything about it is in pretty good nick. The pots, I don't know if you can see here, the pots are kind of spinning behind the scenes, so they're loose and they're probably not working properly as a result. I don't know, but so what we've got is HSS configuration, and we've got pickguard that's yellowed over time, had some stickers on it, a nice little heart there and something else over here, but apart from that it's pretty blemish free. A couple of tiny little scratches here and there, but yeah, good nick, and that is a really nice neck. This is the kind of neck that I could use any day of the week for my headless guitars, for example. I would be happy to use something like that. Nice piece of maple, usually very straight and true. I think they're 9.5, but I can't remember, it's been so long since I did one of these. But you know, perfect for me to refret, nice rosewood, everything. So you know, old Affnity necks from Indonesia I could buy up or accept donations into the old scrap broken down guitars home any day of the week. But anyway, so this one is typical in many ways, and particularly, I mean, it's bog standard, but it's typical in the sense that it plays. It's got very, very high action at this end, and in fact both ends. Just looking at this, I would say that was about a bit over 1 millimetre down at this end. I don't know if this thing will show me really easily. Yeah, it's about 1.5 millimetres down that end, and easily 3.25 at the base end, the neck end. So I'm just going to write it down for my own peace of mind. 1.5 first and 3.25 last. Somebody asked there was a question in one of my videos recently of setting up a tailor, and I was showing my confusion at trying to work out if you need a certain amount of reduction here, how much do you have to take it down here? And the person pointed out that if I was measuring the amount of reduction I wanted at the 12th fret instead of the last fret, then it would be double. You'd take double off the saddle, and I hadn't ever really thought about that, so it's kind of one of those duh moments, you know. It's like, oh yeah, right, if that's the case, and I presume that's true. I know that if you take 1 millimetre off the saddle here, it translates into less as you go down here, obviously, and very little down there. So I'm informed that it's halfway point. It's half the distance down. I've never done the Pythagoras malarkey to decide whether it's exactly true or not, but I don't see any reason why not. I've just been doing it on a sort of slightly conservative guesswork basis, and it's always worked out for me. But it's great when somebody points that out, because you think, oh yeah, that's a bit obvious, isn't it? You know, and it's, until somebody's pointed out, you've never really felt like, well, you've never worked it out, because you know, it threatens to have to think about angles and triangles and math stuff that you left behind long ago. Anyway, but the interesting thing was that he was quite right. If I wanted to work out how much to take off a bridge, then I could, presumably I could judge it from there and double it for the amount off the bridge, off the saddle. Sorry. But implicit in the question is why don't you generally measure the action on the 12th fret where a lot of people do instead of the last fret? And actually I don't personally, because the last fret action is just a way, it's the kind of way I prefer to do it. Also because the 12th fret action changes, not completely, but it changes more when you do adjustments on the relief than the last fret action. The last fret action can remain pretty much where you set it, and if you change the relief you can change the action down here without changing it too much there. So I prefer to do them as separate components, set a last fret action there, decide on an amount of relief, and pay attention to the first fret. Now of course they are, I've said many times, they're all interdependent. You know, you change this action down here and of course that will change the first fret action. You change the neck relief and you'll change the action everywhere, including, but most of all, in the centre of the neck. But you just have to be aware of the interrelationship between those things. So just as a quick tester on this guitar, just to make sure everything works, we have tone that works in the correct position. We've got knobs. That's another tone, isn't it? So that they do what they're supposed to do, but they're just moving around. So we take it apart and make sure those are tightened up while we're at it. So it's so that's out of position as well. It's been kind of knocked, and these have got locator lugs in it, I think. So this one's looks a bit funny. Anyway, there we have our Affinity with our extraordinarily high action. The other thing, I bet this goes out of tune with a good tug. Yep. So I don't know how new or how freshly put on these strings are, but it's going to be very difficult for this guitar to stay in tune. Because every time you bend a string it's going to go out of tune, but we'll not worry about that for now. So what we'll do is we'll just do a good old-fashioned real love guitar setup on this. And the nice thing about these Squier Affnity Strats, in my experience, is that you know, when you give them a nice setup, you can get a really low fast action out of them, and the necks are superb. They play really well, so there's nothing stopping us getting really nice quality. I mean, light as a feather, actually, in my experience. I've had some of the best playing guitars, or the lightest actions I've ever had, have been on Affinity Squiers, and they're great for that. So what will I do with this? I'll do the setup, the action setup first. So we'll combination of setting the relief the way I want it, setting the bridge action down. Everything at the moment looks like it's plenty of room to go down, and then we'll set the first fret action over the cut the nut slots and give it a nice first fret action. Once that's done, then we'll see straight away afterwards whether it needs fret leveling or not. It's likely to. Won't really know now until we've changed that action, but it's very likely to, in which case I'll do fret leveling. But it's in unplayed enough, relatively unplayed condition, hardly any wear anywhere, so it'll level up absolutely fine. and then after that it'll be a case of ditching these strings, taking this off, sorting out the electrics behind there, make sure the pots don't spin anymore, making sure everything works, and then reassembling and go from there. So the first thing, straight away, first thing to do is to check the relief, because it's straight away it's too much. So oh, actually, was it too much? Oh, no, it's the bass. Sorry, I'm just thinking this isn't that bad. The relief on the bass, on James's bass, was pretty big. Great big curve on it. So this is actually not bad at all. I would be comfortable to work with that. But it's really, at this stage at the moment, it's just the two actions at both ends that I want to adjust. Now, typically, if you've got your guitar and you're looking to, let's say you bought this second hand, and you were looking to adjust your action down to a nicer playing action, so you tend to grab hold of an Allen key and do this bit yourself, in which case what most people find is as soon as they start taking the action down, they run into problems in the frets start to buzz, is the usual thing. Now this one, I'm just looking to get a nice playing action out of it. One of the things you find is that you end up with quite a lot of the little posts sticking up, which can be annoying. It can be annoying because it can get in the way of palm muting. If that's the case, then you can buy a separate set of shorter screws to replace these with, if you like a low action, and most customers that I've done this for do. Not so bad. Yeah, you have to buy the set separately. Some people cut them off. I guess you can do that if you are capable of cutting it off. You have to cut them off the bottom end because you still need to access the Allen key hole. Doesn't go the whole way down, if you get what I mean. So let's start with putting this at a position. I'm just going to do this by quite crudely to begin with. We'll go for a 1.5mm last fret action. Now, bearing in mind, I know that's going to change just a little bit when I take down the first fret as well. So I can just simulate that by pressing it down at this end just to give myself a rough idea. So what starts as 1.5 there becomes, 1.25 there. So I can go back up just a little tiny bit, knowing it will come down when I tweak the action. So all of this stuff. I keep saying don't get too hung up about the numbers. You just got to know or have an idea of how these things all relate to each other, and that if you're taking that down, that will increase. If you're, for example, doing this right now, you know that it's bending the neck a little bit in one direction, and that will create a slightly bigger gap between the string and the fingerboard than if you were laying it flat and letting the gravity pull the neck down, and so on and so on. So there's lots of little things, and none of them are so much that you have to get all kind of completely het up about them and have dogma about which way you do things. It's just, you just need to be sort of intelligently aware of what they do, that's all. And I know some people unfortunately still come on YouTube and tell you what an idiot you are and how you're doing it all wrong. Sadly, I had one of those earlier in the week, and I'm kind of not ashamed to say I don't ever get used to how unpleasant it is, and it's mainly because I can't get my head round exactly how it feels to go around trying to make yourself feel better by putting other people down and rubbishing what they do. Yeah, it's just one of those things, and I'm kind of glad I don't ever get used to it. I prefer to be dismayed by it, actually. I'd like it never to be a norm in my world, thank you. Right, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put this cap on just for a minute while I just check these over. Yeah, I don't want it to be the norm, frankly. I think I always want to be disgusted or horrified by it. It's such a shame, and it really is such a big part of what's wrong in our world at the moment, that people treat each other that way. Okay, that's pretty much spot on all the way across for my liking, which is now obviously much lower. So what we've got now, having taken this action down, we've got more zizzy, we've got quite zizzy notes, and we lose the bends. So there's really two considerations when you lower the action. Is one, will the notes actually play? And as you can hear, they're playing but they're struggling a bit. But then can you actually get bends out of the notes too? So the uneven frets will show up in terms of choking off individual notes as you play them if they're really high, or if they're less high but still high, they will strangle bends as you push a note across into the territory of another note, if you like. But they're not altogether not terribly bad, but clearly a little bit uneven. So it requires some degree of fret leveling to make it play the way it deserves to play. And the issue for me here, I've got just enough. I've got some more strings coming, but this is my last pack of these for the time being. What I'm going to do is I'm going to now set the first fret action the way I'd like it, and to do that I'm going to adjust these down. I think it feels like this is bone. I can't remember these being bone, but it feels like, looks a bit like bone, so that would be unusually good. When I get my teeth onto it, it's quite difficult to know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take down the actions to about 0.3 over the first fret, which is my usual target, and I'm going to, what am I going to do it to? What's my 17, 16, 20, right, I'm just trying to work out which combination of things I'm going to use. Where's the 24s, somebody? So 11, 9, 13, 11, 16, yeah, 16 to 24 is about as good as I'm going to get. I don't think I've got 22. No. 16 to 17, it's too close. I'm going to end up with having to sandpaper out the slots. Better to go a bit bigger. 26 to 32-ish will be good. Sorry, 26 to 32, 36 to, could be even 46, but I'll go 42 if I can find it. 36 to 42, 36 to 42, anybody? Sure I've got 42 somewhere. Alright, staring me in the face. 42 and 46 to 48, but that's even potentially on the tight side, and I can widen that out with care. So there's a set to give me free movement of people. I keep saying that. It's my Brexit statement done for the week. Now I want these under normal pitch. It doesn't have to be, it's not concert pitch, it's just approximate tension. When I'm done, I'll have a close look at this tuner as well, see why it's gone off, spinning off round in circles. Okay, so I'm going to get on my metric side, I'm going to get 0.3 of a millimetre, which is my preferred first fret action. I'm going to start with 32. These have been worked on before, and somebody's put some, they've either replaced the nut, feels like bone, but there's somebody's put graphite in the slots as well, but they are pretty high. You know, they're quite a way higher than I would recommend or aim for. One of the things that isn't great on this kind of guitar, by the way, is these butterfly string trees. They do seem to provide quite a lot of surface for strings to grip on. I've got a cut finger, which is not helping. Yeah, they can stick there a bit and end up pinging. So actually that's cutting a bit more like plastic, I think, which is okay as long as I can get there. If it doesn't cut right and I can't get to where I'm aiming for, I will ditch it. If it behaves absolutely fine, then there's no harm in it. It's really, for me, it's not about the material so much as it is about the cutting, dependability of the cutting. Any dense plastic is good enough to do the job. You won't get sort of a massive tonal difference from a bone nut like this compared to a dense plastic one, but for me it's down to whether or not I can cut with the accuracy I want, and often plastic just doesn't seem to want to do it. So this is at least sort of 0.5 of a millimetre too high, so providing we can take it off nicely in the angle we want. And that isn't just about, well, it is about setting the first fret action nice and low and therefore light and playable, but it's also about the role this plays in contributing to tuning stability. So the amount of benefits that you get from taking care of your nut slots are considerable. First, I suppose the first one is that it sets a lowish action over the first fret, and that itself does two things. It makes the guitar considerably lighter. Sorry, you're going to get dazzled from there. Considerably lighter to play when you're fretting chords and notes down here. That's the first immediate benefit. Second one, actually three benefits really. Second one is that it does away with potential intonation issues you get when the strings are too high over the first fret here. The amount of bending that happens when you fret notes here causes them to go sharp. And even with the lightest technique, it's kind of almost impossible to stop them going sharp. So I'm just going to go back to the previous one and make sure that I've got it to the right height. Yeah, so you not only do you create a light action over the first fret, light playing action, you stop the strings going sharp and having resultant intonation problems, which they can really ruin the experience of the guitar. And then the third and really important thing very important thing is that you aim to create free moving strings through the nut slots, so they need to be wide enough and smooth and lubricated enough for the strings to pass cleanly through when you're tuning, so that you don't get any build-up or inequality of pressure on either side of here, or tension, because when you do, even tiny amounts, what you get is it goes out of tune very easily. So for example, if you're tuning up and the pressure is it sticks and the pressure is slightly higher here than it is here because it's sticking there, the minute you bend it, you equalize the pressure and this note goes flat. And it only has to be the tiniest amount in order to ruin the tuning stability of your guitar. So those are the principal benefits of taking care of your nut slots, but they make such a big difference. You know, it's one of those things that people kind of go, yeah, well, oh, yeah, I knew that, or it's obvious, and you know, yet they don't do it for various reasons. And the consequences, they have a guitar that goes out of tune, has intonation problems when you fret notes down at the nut end, and or is tiring to play in ways that you perhaps don't really know how to describe, but what you tend to find is you just don't go and pick it up anymore, and that's usually the mark of, you know, the guitar's setup not being right. So we're just getting down on this, getting down with this E string to near where we want it. And the nut, whatever it's made of, is behaving pretty well, I'm pleased to say. Okay, so that's the bottom three done. Now we'll do the top three. Just drop these off for a minute and go G outwards. And so the thing is, if you get used to doing this to your guitars, then you're going to want to do it to all your guitars when you experience how much easier they are to play. And the question is do you need to spend a lot of money on these expensive fret files, nut files? And the answer is no. You can do it with lots of different things. You just need to know what you're aiming for, and you can see how I'm measuring it. I'm aiming for a set distance over the first fret. It doesn't take much more complex than a feeler gauge, typical auto industry feeler gauge, to help me work that out. In my ebook it shows how to do all of these slots, a whole set of 6, with a single cheap jeweler's file. The only slight downside of that is, the upside is it's incredibly cheap and quick. Downside is only that it potentially leaves a slightly sharp V at the bottom of the slot, which you probably need to just soften out with what I recommend is some of the little welding nozzle cleaners that you can buy cheaply online. These little things, they've got little serrated bits on them. They're designed for cleaning welding guns, but they do pretty well for, they're not great cutters. They can take quite a while if you're actually trying to cut a deep slot with them, but they're not bad at all for once you've, let's say you use the jeweler's V file and then you want to just round out the bottom. You can pick a appropriate size gauge and just kind of use it to clean the bottom of the slot out. So that's one way of doing it. So you don't have to spend tons of money to have these files around all the time, and if you do loads of guitars you probably want to do that. Yeah, I'll stop there. You know, and I only bought these because I'm going to be doing it lots, so it made sense. And then if you're going to do this, the thing is you can't go too wrong. I mean, you can go wrong, and if you go wrong there are a couple of escape routes for you. The simplest one is to have a spare Strat or Tele style nut handy. You know, and if you buy from China you can get them for very little money. If you buy them from the UK it might cost you £5 or something like that, but you know, to have the peace of mind to experiment and learn is not a bad price to pay at all. And chances are you won't need it, but you know, to have one to hand is definitely a good investment, especially when you experience the scale of the difference it will make to your guitar's playing. So have a spare one handy. If that doesn't work, or if it goes wrong and you don't have one handy, you can always either shim this nut, raise it all higher and come back down again lowering the other slots as well, but also the one, you know, it's paying attention to the one that maybe went too low. So now you've raised it up again and it's back to where it should be, or maybe a little high and you still have to cut it a tiny bit to get it to where it should be. Or you can fill the hole that you've gone, or the slot you've gone too far with a bit of super glue and bicarbonate of soda, which makes a sort of cement that you can then recut. And repeating this process, so you've got quite a bit of option on getting out of jail, as I call it. I'm pretty close there. I'm going to stop. Don't over push it. These are such tiny clearances at this stage. When I say I'm doing it at 0.3 over the first fret, I mean anywhere between 0.25 and 0.35, something like that, but it's so small that it looks kind of pretty even to the eye, even though there's always going to be some tiny variation. But it's so much lower than it was that you know, it doesn't really matter exactly what it is, other than you've got the improvement out of it that you intended. That's the main point of doing it. You know, and I keep on making that point, that this thing about numbers, don't get too obsessed with numbers. They really are only a means to an end. Now, yes, if you're building a space shuttle or something, then, you know, where things have to come together in a certain way, of course your tolerances and your numbers are vital for constructing something. But when it comes to a setup like this, people say, well, what's the exact amount of relief? And the answer to that is none. You know, there's no exact amount. You can play the guitar with no relief in the neck at all, no curvature. It will play with a flat neck if your action at both ends is high enough. If the action goes lower to where most people want it, then you find that having no relief suddenly becomes a problem, because there's suddenly not enough room for the strings to spin at their center point, if you like, and then it starts to come out as a kind of fret buzz, unless you raise the action back up. So if you want a low action, you need some relief, and the guitar's kind of intended to play with some relief. Okay, so we're getting lower. I'll double check the relief again on this because it was reasonable. Let's see what it measures as. Probably about 0.2 or something. Or even we've got 0.3 on there. Let's see if it's as high as 0.3. And we want, you know, you can count the numbers if you like, or you can eyeball halfway. You know, you're basically looking at the gap, the curve halfway. This is quite high, so this is I would say, this is about 0.5 actually. So we can take this down a little bit. The reason I'm saying that is, having set these low as my normal lowness, it still appears to be quite high action, and that's because of the relative amount of relief. So I can take the correct thingy thing, and in this case I want to tighten it up, put some counter, get the truss rod to counter the curvature of the neck a little bit, to flatten it out, and it may not immediately take effect, so I'll just sort of leave it for a little bit, and keep the Allen key handy in case I need it again. But what I've got straight away, as I can tell, it's got a really light feel down here. See, that's the thing that you can see that we can't get, is a bend out of this. Can't get past the half a tone or semitone, so that's not great. And this isn't an overly tight radius, so that's the uneven frets showing up. So if we do a light fret leveling on this, that's going to, well, the aim will be to to make sure that we've freed up this note. And we can do it because I do the fret leveling with the strings on. Now what I'm going to do first is I'm going to slack them off so I can mark up the frets with marker pen, and then we'll put them back on and tighten them up again. And this is why I like to, I call these sacrificial strings, because they're going to come off and on a couple of times while we're doing the nut slot cutting, and also while we're doing things like painting the frets. And so, you know, you really, even if these are fairly new, they're quite dead sounding, but if they were, even if they were fairly new, I would still prefer to put some new ones on at the end of all of this, because they're getting a bit of a pull around now, which, you know, takes some bit of their life off. So it's not the same as having a nice new set to begin with. The downside of the new set, of course, is that it needs stretching out, and I have to say, I think that's what whoever it was that commented, unpleasant comment on my last one, seemed to think that stretching the strings out was some sort of diabolic satanic thing that I was doing, and it seemed like nothing had ever offended him more than the fact that I was stretching the strings so vigorously. But you know, you can see from this guitar, which I presume, judging by the deadness of these strings, they've been on here a long time, and you could see just by when I pulled the strings they were clearly going out tune very quickly. You can see this guitar's tuning instability has everything to do with the amount of slack stored in the strings. So Mr. taking offence at it seems a bit silly, really. Mind you, if somebody wants to have a guitar that stays out of tune forever, welcome to it. Weird to get so irate about it though, isn't it? Okay, that will do in terms of enough tuning for the purpose of doing the fret leveling. I'm just going to check the relief again, see if it's made any adjustment. It's gone down a little bit, not a huge amount. I'll take my what did we say it was, about 0.5. Let's check it against the 0.5. It's quite high for amount of relief. I mean, if you go and look at people's recommended blah-de-blahs, I think you'll see that Fender or Squier probably say something like 0.25 or something, so that's now lower than 5. But the great thing is, let's go 0.25, see what we got. The great thing is if you do it to whatever works for you. That's still, but that's quite a bit above 0.25. I'll take a bit more off. Do whatever works for you, and more importantly, actually, is explore what it does as you change it. That's the most important thing of all, is to have the experience of what the actual adjustments do, because that's the only way you get the experience of it. And too many people live in terror. Is that rain? I don't think it is. Better go and get my power sander in. Too many people live in terror of making adjustments to the truss rod, like it will explode on them or something, and it's you don't need to be that careful with it. British summertime. Don't you just love it? Not. Okay. Yeah, so yeah, a lot of people just avoid doing it because they're afraid of touching it. So better to explore and see what it does than to leave it be a mystery. You'd have to hit it really hard, swing off it to break it. Now that immediately feels low, again back to where I would expect it to be, and it's quite a small amount of relief. That last little turn has straightened it out quite a bit. Okay, that's an old string. One bend and it dies on me. Well, I'll need the string, a string on there, so I'm just going to replace it with one of my millions of spare ones, and I was hoping not to have to take the back off just yet to do it. Come on. Thank you. Sorry about this little delay. I don't know what the diameter gauge this was. It's 8 or 9, but it didn't feel like an 8 to me. I'll go with a 9. I don't quite trust the, what do you call it, those verniers. What's that now? They're a little bit not cheap exactly, but they're relatively budget Amazon specials, but they're good enough for most purposes. I wouldn't try and rebuild an engine using them, and this actually feels like a 10 for what it's worth, but that's okay for the purposes of this particular activity. Right, I'll be with you in a second. So again, this is really, I'm only putting this on just to keep the loading on the neck. Don't mind, it will go in the bin with the others. Back under their little stringy trees. Right, chop that off, spare bit, and we'll be ready to go. So again, I'll just do a little bit of double checking on the relief, make sure it hasn't moved anymore, and if necessary I'll take a little bit off. Again, you can do this as many times as you like. See, we'll take a tiny fraction off, but actually that's only because we have the luxury of doing it. But I would be okay to work with that as is, but let's take a tiny bit off just to prove the fact that we can do it. Smallest adjustments, as you saw, like probably a 20th of the total 360 turn or something like that. Tiny amount. Okay, so that's that. I'm going to get my devices for fret leveling, and basically just going to dive straight into this because we've done the sort of important setup bits. We've chosen the relief we want in the neck, set a really nice low action both ends, and now the game is to make the neck or the frets comply with what we've chosen, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this tunable fret level tool, or aka a truss rod with some sandpaper stuck to it, and I'll start with it slack so it's got no curve in it, and I'm going to use these three little domed doofers here as a way of tuning this, or telling me when I've tuned this rod to match the curvature in the actual neck, and that's about right. So once I've matched the curvature, what I do is I drop off the top E, whichever one, and push, put a spreader between them, and basically clear the way to lay the tool onto the frets and then work up and down in that track with the tool. Now, it's 400 grit sandpaper, so it's a slow-ish process. It's abrasive enough to eventually take all the metal off your frets if you're not careful, so you obviously don't want to overdo it. So I always stop and do a little diagnostic thing, which is to see where it's cutting and how. And very often the first thing you'll see is where it's cutting most, and that will tell you where your high frets are. So there's one cutting a lot there, not so much, none there, a little bit there, not much, not much, not much, some, not much, quite a lot, not so much, 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 quite a lot, quite a lot. So there's a little cluster here and there, and the point is we don't have to level everything till everything's shiny metal. What we have to do is level it only until the notes all play, and actually in this case the notes all bend the way we want them to. So knowing that all the notes played to begin with, and it wasn't the playing part on this E string that was the problem, I'm just going to stop there and double check. Okay, I'm happy with that as a set of notes. Now I can't really tell if it's going to, well actually look at that, it's already improved the bend. Not quite there, or there. Okay, so we expect those bends to free up once we do the next slots or tracks. Okay, because we haven't got to those bits. That's where the string moves, and that's where it gets choked. So I'm going to use the same calibration on this bar for the second track, or the B track I would call it. And again, just trying not to, I'm not using too much downward force. I don't want to deform the tool. Just better to let gravity do the most of the work. And again, what you'll see is where it's cutting and where it isn't, and you can sort of do a bit and then stop and have a sort of good look. And again, it's again pointing out to me where the significant high frets are. Now, like I said, interestingly, it's the low frets that ultimately dictate what everything else has to do, because a low fret makes the next one a high fret. Okay, I can hear a little bit of buzzing still in there. It's not full on buzz, but it's a little bit of a burr. So I'm just gonna, actually what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna recalibrate. That's the thing I also recommend doing loads of times. If you think it might have changed shape, which it can do, I always recommend stopping and recalibrating. It's much better to be certain that the bar is following the curve of the neck, rather than go off with one that's totally uncalibrated. Now that, in that case, it is the same. So we go back to this, and I'm going to cut away a little bit more, and that should free up all those notes first and foremost, and in doing so it's likely to free up the bends on that E. And as we go across all the strings, that we should be able to bend that E further in turn as we go. And you can see quite a bit coming off there, which is just the nature of the unevenness of the strings. Brilliant. Not yet. We'll do the G slot and we'll see what happens next. Then we get to a place there, if it can't do it, if we can't get it to a place where it's level enough to play the bends we want, we have to decide, make a judgment call on whether we're compromising and take the action up a tiny fraction, and that's always, it's always that judgment call. There's no absolute. I don't want to take all of the fret metal down to bottom out some uneven fret down here that's causing the thing to not be able to bend those high notes. I don't want to take all the frets down and take life off all of them just to avoid going up a 100th of an inch or something on the action. So, because you can actually move the action quite a bit without it feeling much different, and that equates to a lot of material taken off. What am I doing? Let's do this. So we'll see. We'll get this G done, and then have a kind of look back at these first three and see what we've got. But like I said, a low fret anywhere in your sequence of frets is your lowest common denominator, because it will make the next fret behave as if it's high, because it is relatively high. It's high relative to that fret, and if it's high relative to that fret, then what happens is it causes the note to choke as if the fret was high, and as opposed to the note being the one we're talking about being low. And so you have to make a judgment call. Do you follow them all to the bottom of their bottom them out in however low they are, or do you compromise? They're all sort of pretty much playing, so still not quite happy somewhere on that B stroke G track with this E. And again, if I just check the height of the action on here, I'll give you an example of, hang on a minute, this is ridiculously low, no wonder it's not. Let's just tweak that a little bit. Yeah, so in a sense raising the action to what I was aiming for, which was about 1 millimetre, which we've got there. I may well just clear it up now. Hello. So that's cured it, and that's because it was a little bit lower than I wanted it to be, and the same with this next one. That's because of the adjustment to the relief as well, so that's how they play off each other.
There's not even any room for your tea.
I know it's a real mess.
What shall I do?
Move something a little bit.
You're a mocky puppy.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. Okay, now then, go up a little bit here.
I've moved something, there's nowhere to
And there's
put
still
that
no room,
either.
no room.
Right.
Engaged in nuclear physics or something.
What, tidying up your shed?
That's later. Okay, 1.5, 1.25, 1.2, 1.1. Okay, we're going down to, right, perfect. Okay. Good. Thank you very much for my tea. Wind out. Okay, next track, we're going to the D. So you can see that the tiny little movement adjustment there on the height to get it where it should have been was absolutely fine to clear that up. So how does that feel? That feels right still. So we've still got the same relief curve as in the last track, which is fine. Not always the case. Sometimes it changes between one side of the neck radius and the other. But that's why doing this recalibration is good, because you can adjust for that as you go. You tend to find that the lower strings, because you tend not to bend them so much, and in the gradient of playing action they tend to be a little higher anyway. You tend to have less choking or buzzing problems. Not always. Do a tiny bit more at hardly any. So there we go. So this process now of just making the frets comply with the action that we want this thing to have. Of course, what it means is if you were to lower the action any further, once I've set this up, then you would run into buzzers again. But the point here is that at 1.5 millimeters with low action at this end as well, and a reduced amount of relief, the whole thing's going to feel low and fast anyway. So this is the playing action we're going for. I suppose you could argue if you were leveling with the neck dead flat on the workbench and you had a radius block or something, you could argue that you, for what it's worth, you had 100% levelness. That's actually true with the neck in a would be true with the neck in an uncompressed state, but actually when you put the strings on, you add compression, not just curvature but compression to the neck, and that compression does change the positions of the frets relative to each other, so you lose some of that accuracy, but you'd also have bought yourself that accuracy. The downside of doing it with that radius block in that way was that you'd to get that notional 100% start point accuracy, you'd be taking off more fret material than you actually need to play at the action that I'm choosing here. So you can see that this is a bit more preserving of precious fret metal, because you choose a target action and then you only take as much as is required to make it play at that chosen low action. And the truth is, why would you arbitrarily want to take any more if you're never going to go lower than that? So this is kind of going after a particular playing action, and so it's a really good way, in my experience, of doing fret leveling on older guitars with less fret metal available. You know, where you can actually do it without taking more than you need, and thus preserving as much as possible. I'd much rather do it this way for those reasons. And actually, because of the issue with the compression, it is a fraction more accurate in my experience than doing it with the neck off, but it's not a huge amount. Doing it at all, whichever method you use, is the real one-off improvement. I mean, you know, that takes it from no level frets to either mostly level or pretty much level frets, and that basic improvement is such a step up from unleveled frets that's the real big difference. I'm done. So there we have it, fret leveled fairly quickly, fairly easily. I like these affinities because they are very compliant like that. Okay, it's 5 o'clock, I've got about an hour left to do, so we can move on. So I don't know if you can see it or not now, but we have a guitar that, I mean, you barely have to look at it to make it play. Delightful. So now I'm going to get rid of these strings. They've done their service, and we're just going to move on to, actually what I will do is I'll check out why this is doolally. We can get rid of these strings for now, and then we'll get on to the next part of this. So as you can see, or you may be able to see, we've put some flat spots on the frets. So this is the point of the procedure where we reshape the frets to get rid of those flat spots and to return them to as close to an arch shape as we can. It isn't entirely possible, they won't be quite the same shape as they were when they were brand spanking new, but we can get close to it. And importantly, we can get close enough so that the frets don't suffer any intonation or playing problems, which you'd get if you left it unreprofiled. And some people, some techs I've seen their handiwork do. I've seen them with, you know, they've leveled frets, and I've got guitars through that where somebody's clearly leveled the frets, but then they've sort of given up at that point and just polished them up or given them a rub over, and away they go. So I'm going to do also at this point is I'm just going to take off the plate. Yeah, so that's not ideal when that happens, because you end up with frets that are too wide, and it moves the intonation distance, or the length, the playing length of the string alters, and typically it gets shorter because the point of the apex of the string moves closer technically towards the nut, so you get a shorter playing length, which means the intonation is wrong, the note's actually sharp in a lot of different places along the way. So anyway, that's the one of the most important reasons why you need to reshape it. Okay, so out all these old ones. So, it's got it's typical Squier. It's got the sort of standard low mass, we call it tremolo block. Technically, people say the high mass steel one is better, but I can't hear so much difference. Now, while we're here, before I do any further stuff, we've got to get this off. This is a little bit of a detour. We'll get this off and pay attention to those knobs. In fact, we'd better take the plastic off first. The two-handed grip of doom usually works. Failing that, you can use a different devices, or a piece of fabric or string or something to get under there to pull them. Or some people use spoons and things. Okay. It's all very good condition, no decay or stuff on the on this guitar, so it's not had a lot of playing experience. It's been well looked after and left relatively unmolested in its time. Okay, so it's got shielding paint in there, and we've got movement in these thingies. It's difficult to get to any of them while this is still connected, so just for the sake of readjusting these, I would probably, maybe I can just about, I can get to there, that's fine. Yeah, so I don't know if you can see, but these pots are spin-tastic. So what I'll do is I'll undo them, put a tiny bit of the old blue, my favourite blue goo, a bit of Loctite, and that will just hold it a bit more, stop it coming undone again. It can be undone, it's not impossible to undo, it just prevents it moving. It's all a little bit fiddly at this point, because while you're still attached with a wire, a couple of earth wires, you can't really get a very good run at anything. So what I'll do is I'll just take that off a bit and just put a tiny blob of blue on there, if it will come out. Thank you. The thing about this stuff is you can see that over time that's what happens, they start to move. There's only so much you can do by tightening up the actual pot like this with the thing. So the tiny bit of Loctite blue should just help it hold off moving for that little bit longer. And because the simple reason that the movement on these things is what ends up breaking the solder joints underneath the hood, as they say in the States. And I can mop up any excess in a second, that's not too important. But yeah, so I always think about, what is it that moves most on guitars, and it's obviously the knobs and the switches and tremolos and things like that, and the tunings. But anything that has electrics and moves a lot is kind of, it's almost guaranteed at some point to come undone. And when it does, it's going to, see, that's practically undone as well. When it does, it's going to break the electrics, and then you've got a fault and you've got to take it apart anyway. So might as well, once you're doing a setup like this, you might as well take the extra few minutes just to take care of those so that they won't come undone again and break any, in the future. And then of course, while we're under there, we can also give it a quick shot of two things, I suppose. It'll give it a bit of a dust through with the air. The only things that need the dust blowing out of them are the switch and the pots. Not much of it you can't get very far into, and you can have a little bit of a squirt into the pots if you can. Again, not easy to get in there. Quick shot into there, and we've got any excess. Okay, so with a bit of luck, and drop that back on there. And what I'll do is I'll just put on a couple of these before doing a quick test to make sure that nothing has come undone during the making of this movie. Just makes sense really. If you're moving things around, you're holding tight to pots with your bare hands, and it's possible that in doing so you break a connection. So it's much better to find that out sooner, like now, while you've got the hood off, rather than later when you've done it all up and restrung it again, and then suddenly find half of the pickups don't work. So everything's good. So that's that taken care of. Don't have to worry about that part of it. And the small repair done, taken care of. The any possible future movement from there. Okay, so we just we'll get the mechanical thing out, electronical thing, and we'll just show all of these in at a mild rate of torque, not much, i.e. Okay, all done. Nearly. Right, so there we have that important bit of that done. I'm just going to clean off the neck a second, so that when I put some masking tape on here in a minute, it's not getting sort of caught up in dust. The nice thing about doing the neck the way I've just done it, doing the frets in the playing position, is that basically when I come to restring it in a little while, once we've done finished reshaping and then polishing out the frets, once we restring it, the whole playing action, everything about the neck returns to its original levelled position. And it just does. You don't have to worry about it. It resets itself to where we just had it, and it will play exactly that way. So let's get these lined up. 1, volume, tone, tone, tone. Come along. There we go. Right. Next part of this then is to reshape these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark them all up again with pen. I'm just looking at the fingerboard. It's got a little split here. I don't know if that's age or dried out over age or something, but it's never a problem. I've had quite a few that do that, but sometimes you can just notice. It's kind of not surprising in a way, because it's a fairly thin bit of rosewood, and you know, any long thin piece of wood is going to get splits in it somewhere along the way. Okay, so for this I'm going to use a Stumac reprofiling tool, and basically just use this tool to just shave off gently the edges of any flat spot, so that we get a bit more of an arch shape back out of it. And where we haven't levelled much, then we don't have to do much work. You'll see me stopping a bit where we've done more levelling, but most of this was fairly minor in terms of actual volume. There wasn't an awful lot being taken off. So it's all looking fairly quick and straightforward. I expect to find a little bit more down this end. Well, I took more of the material off some individual frets, so you kind of see it shows up more of a flat spot to work on. But again, even still, it's not a massively long part of the process. Sometimes when we've had to take the loads off, it does take a few more minutes. We end up having to work quite hard on certain spots, but the way it looks at the moment, this is all pretty good. Okay, stop there. And then the next part of this is to risk tripping over my stands again. Next part of this, I'm going to stop the video in a second, but I'm just going to basically mask off the neck with this low-tack masking tape. I'm going to cover the whole neck up, hold the fingerboard I should say, and then I'm going to use a variety of different grades of paper from 600 through to 1500 to sand down the frets into a nice smooth even shape, and then finish off with some micro mesh pads running from 1500 grit to 12,000 to get a real playable shine out of it. And then they'll be ready, basically ready to play again. And what I'll do is after that I'll oil the board, have a look at this tuner. But once I've oiled the fingerboard, then be ready to put the strings back in, back on, and that will then be almost there. New strings will take time to stretch out, despite running the risk of upsetting some strange individual who doesn't like it. Tough. And obviously to do that I also have to cut some bits of paper to the right shape and size, because obviously the frets get thinner and close together. Anyway, so I'm going to come back to you when I'm restringing, and we'll be close to the sort of final part of the setup, which will be restringing and stretching out the slack, double checking everything, the action included, making sure the pickups are set to a good height, And then finally, once it's all up and running and setting the intonation, which is a matter of adjusting each individual string to make sure it's exactly the right length, unique length it has to be for the neck in question. And once we've done that, that will mean all the notes up and down the neck will play correctly and tuned the way they should wherever they're fretted. Now I am in need, I think, of a new blade because they've got mucky, and this little tusk here is such a pain without a decent blade. This dispensing unit doesn't want to comply. Anyway, right, so I will do that and I'll see you in a little bit when I've got the strings back on. Looky, we're done at the shiny bit. Okay, there's about half an hour of shining going on there. Done and dusted. Now, just the one thing I wanted to check out was this tuner. Let's see what's up with it. Let's see why it's going off round in circles. Could well be slightly broken. So once I've done that, I've lost something now. Okay, let's have a look. It's got two little locator lugs, which is how it normally works. Okay, a little plastic washer's broken down, so it's got too much movement. That's not a lot I can do about that. And it's actually, its locator lugs are slightly off to begin with. It's a mixture of misplaced and slightly gone wandering. Yeah, this little tiny plastic washer in there has gone walkies. I don't think got anything else like that knocking about, so I'm afraid it's going to have to be what it is. I'll just do it up as tight as possible. Just a thing to watch out for if you see anybody with a spare Squier Affnity tuner with the two lugs. You might want to get hold of it, James, or get one in from somewhere. Okay, so all the shining polishing done, back to a playing condition. So I'm going to take all the tape off now and clean up the body and the board, and then restring. Or put new strings on, I should say, maybe, better way of putting it. And at this point the guitar is always a bit dusty, even though obviously the purpose of this tape isn't to keep the dust off it so much as to ensure that the sandpaper that I use doesn't hit the bodywork. So hence I extend it quite a lot past the neck itself onto the horns of the body. It's all too easy for the sandpaper to run away with you, and then you sort of dull up the surface, and then at worst you leave it like that, or at best you have to kind of try and polish it out, which takes quite a long time and never gets back to a factory finish really. So rule number one, avoid it in the first place. Okay, so this guitar is currently set to effectively hardtail, although it's not. It's probably usable with a tremolo if James has one at home, because the tremolo claw isn't screwed all the way in, so it's probably not under so much tension that you could probably still use it just by putting an arm in. But again, it would be in the simple tremolo kind of usage, i.e. the downward shimmer only, as I would call it. If you want to set the 6-screw tremolo for floating, you've got to do a bit more to it, but it's perfectly capable of doing it. And if you get, the interesting thing is, if you get the nut slots right and you get all the slack out of your strings and you set everything up right, the tremolo on the Strat is perfectly capable of working in a floating mode and actually remaining, keeping your strings staying pretty well in tune as well. People just assume that the trem by default on a budget guitar is crap and can't, will constantly put the guitar out of tune. And in a way, it's not. The truth is, it's not the tremolo that puts the guitar out of tune. Really, it's the problems with the nut slots and the slack in the strings. So yeah, I'm just going to use a bit of this Coleman's fluid to just clean off as much dust as I can find. This thing, there's quite a lot of it around, so it takes a little while to give it a good clean up. That's the downside of cleaning up your guitar's neck, or doing your frets I should say. Let's use this cloth. Oops. So just a bit of a clean up, and then I'll do oil the fingerboard, and then we'll restring and get ready to stretch out and get our strings into playing condition, including to the right length by intonating them. So let's whiz around the pockets, the horns. Get rid of all goo. Okay, that's nice. Right, and I'll do a little bit up and down the neck with the tissue and some of this, and then I'll go over that with oil. This does lift off the grease and the oils pretty well, so it's always good to give it an oiling afterwards, so you get rid of some of the built up grime, but you do want to just give it a quick once over with some sort of fretboard oil in order to give it back it's not looking bad actually, but sometimes they look really dry after going over with this stuff. Dry isn't the correct term, but you know what I mean. De-oiled. Okay. So I'm going out shortly, so I'm going to need to get the strings on and hang this baby up pretty quickly. So oil, oil, oil. I'm just looking at the measurement now, so we've lost 1.75 millimeters from the playing action at the down near the end fret, last fret. So it's a hell of a difference in playing action. And it's one of the things I always check with people. Do you want a low, fast playing action that I like to do? And they say yes. So that's what they get. And I'm very conscious that I'm not sure how familiar or how much James would have played this before, but I think he might have been a guitar he bought recently, but if I'm wrong, the point is, let's say this is a guitar that he's played for years, and the amount of difference this is now, it will be beyond recognition. So it will absolutely not feel like the guitar that he's been playing before. It will, sometimes you've got to remember that can be, sounds great on paper and great to someone like me who likes doing it, but actually if this was your guitar and you'd be taken by surprise how different it was, and it might not be a pleasant surprise because change has changed, and sometimes it's just so different, it'll be really weird. So I always try and remind people that the smallest amounts of changes here make the biggest amount of difference. Incredible amount of difference, actually. I'm just looking at these. I'm going to bend these strings out of the way in a second. Just clean the bridge a little bit. It's a little bit grimy. Give it a quick polish while it's exposed, and we can. Yeah, so tiny changes make huge differences, and make no mistake, it can seem almost too much. Or, you know, there's a risk that it can be such a big difference. And sometimes, I mean, in a way, that's one of the blessings of when you do customer setups. You know, somebody sends you their guitar, that they know how it feels, and of course, on the plus side, when you send it back to them, they also know what a difference it is, and so most of the time, people who send me their guitars, most of the time, all of the time, when they send their guitars, they're really, really happy with the outcome, you know, how it's been improved. What's this on the back of here? Sticky glue. It's less guaranteed, that sort of success is less guaranteed when you buy and sell a guitar that somebody's not seen before. You know, I bought it, I set it up, and then somebody buys it off me. It's a little less assured, because like I said, they don't know. Ah, damn, this is upside down. Let's go back. Yeah, it's just somebody hasn't played it, so they don't know the scale of the improvement. So, you know, once in a long while I sell one and it's not up to what somebody's expecting, and you know, that's the difficulty of buying, setting up and selling. You don't have as much say over the expectations that somebody has over something, from something. You know, you do your best, but occasionally it's going to fall short of somebody else's expectations, and you just have to live with that in this game. But it's why I prefer to keep the amount of buying, setting up and selling down to a manageable minimum. Okay, so now we're into the restring mode. This is very rattly, this one, unfortunately. So I pull these up and through to make sure they're through the body properly, and then I pull back a fret and a finger, and then go over, just as James had actually, go over the top of the loose one, and then under the loose one on the second time round, and then we'll cut off the excess loose bit. And then, so I'll do it sooner rather than later, so it's not in the way. And now onwards. Sometimes I can, when you've got, if there's pinging from these trees, I sometimes put a little bit of grease on the underside of them just to ease the strings through them, because I hate this metallic ping that you can get. It seems really silly having gone to all the trouble to free up the path of the strings and improve it as much as this, and then end up with little sort of pingy, gritty noises from these badly made pieces of metal. So I'll see how it sounds and feels, but if it gives any trouble, I'll put a little dab of sort of engine grease or whatever, that solid grease stuff just under there, just to kind of deaden any pinging, but also to ease it through. Ow, my finger hurts. Okay. I didn't think I'd finish all of this just now, but it's actually proved to be relatively straightforward. I wondered there might have been some more electrical issues, but it turns out there haven't been, so I'm pleased to get this one done today, and then I can concentrate on the bass guitar tomorrow. Judging by the action on that one, again, it's an Affinity P bass. Is it called P bass? I think so. Anyway, This is Affinity, Squier Affnity version of the Fender P bass, precision bass. I think, I don't know much about them to be honest, but it has got a massive relief in the neck at the moment, and it's got an astonishingly high action, and neither of those are necessary for it to play well. What I don't have right now, and I won't have till Monday, is some new strings for the bass, so I can get the sort of action setting and the levelling done if levelling is required, but I'll have to wait till Monday or so to restring. But if that's not bad if most of the work's done before then. Bass guitars are newer in my inventory of experience, I suppose, and I've had some that have just been really easy to see how improved they were, and some a little less straightforward in how they played and felt afterwards. So it's kind of it's unsettling, but a little bit sort of okay, how do I know how much improved that is over the original? It's nice when it's a very distinct thing, like this kind of Squier Strat. It's such a clear improvement that you've got no ambiguity about it, and it's good for your confidence in working on things, because you can tell straight away what the improvement is. Okay, so having put on the new strings, obviously they're going to be very stretchy. Not stretchy. They're going to have a lot of slack in them. So I'm just pulling out the sort of the immediate obvious slack. I've got loads of spare E's, because often while I'm doing this I'm going to... Oh, that didn't go quite through the body. Yeah, I've got loads of spare top E's, so that when I inevitably break one of these whilst stretching out the string, I can always pull them down. But that's why I buy the Rotor Sound sets, because they're superb, and there's always a spare one. So let me just tune it up to begin with. Tape good there. Right, I'll sort of tidy up, fine tune the action in a minute. And the nice thing about aiming in the first place for a very low action, of course, is that you have freedom afterwards to start really, really low if you want to. But if you don't like it, you can go back upwards a little bit. So you have the freedom. Whereas if you don't level, you're sort of stuck at whatever the frets will allow you to do, which often isn't a lot. So this is the brutal string stretching that upset somebody so much. And frankly, you've got to do this if you want your guitar to stay in tune. I make no apologies for it. I've been given now so many guitars from other people, possibly more than the person who made that comment has, but I've been given hundreds of guitars from other people, and pulled having people complaining of tuning problems, and I've pulled slack out their strings years after they've restrung them. Sometimes to their great surprise, because you can tune it, and for normal playing, it'll tune up beautifully. If you're strumming chords all day long or something, it'll stay in tune until you go, and then it'll go out of tune. Okay, so that's the slack. Now, as I'm tuning up and stretching on these strings, I'm listening for pings on the nut first of all. I'm expecting the strings to detune each time I stretch them like this, but less each time, which they do. And then it gets to a point where they don't really detune that much at all, in which case you reach the sort of stable point and they will stay in tune from that point onwards. But listening first of all to how much they go out of tune when you stretch them, and then secondly listening for pings through the nut slots, and these are not pinging at all, which means they're running smooth. Now that will be one of the biggest contributors towards tuning stability of all. Actually 50% of it will be down to the nut slots being good. Sometimes you'll hear a ping and you'll think it's the nut slot needing widening, but actually in a case of a guitar like this it may well turn out to be the string tree that needs lubricating. So less out of tune. That low E knob is a bit, tuning peg is a bit hard. Right, so we are nearly there. Yeah, a little tiny bit of relief. Now what I'd also be doing at this point is bending some of the strings to squeeze out the last bit of residual slack in them. Not expecting much at this point, and then a bit of a tug this way. This is where they usually break, if at all, usually the top E. And then I think, right, I've got past that, that's it, I'm stable now. I'm not going to pull too much anymore. So I'm not hearing any pings or anything, so the tuning's really fluid and smooth, and I think we're pretty much there now. Staying very close to being in tune. Okay, the only remaining thing is the intonation, which time-wise, I've probably just about got time to do it now. Let's just do it quickly. We'll get the phone tuner, 98% juiced up, get the little tuner on it. I prefer to use the other one, but this does. It's usually straightforward enough on a guitar like this. Sometimes find that it can, on some guitars it can struggle with the lowest notes, and it's good to go to a electric, non-acoustic. This is slightly working acoustically. Okay, so if I do it in this position, I'm doing it in kind of playing upright position. So what I want to do is tune the harmonic to an open A, sorry, an A. When I get there, then I want to fret the 12th fret, and ideally, if the string is the right length, it'll be the same note. If it's flat, which appears to be slightly flat, it's not that far off actually, slightly flat, then the string's too long and we sort of go forward a little bit. Now, looking at the pattern of intonation, let's start with the top E. I'm thinking that this is not far off. I heard a little tiny ting there from the string tree, or a click actually. that's pretty much on, if not a tiny fraction, tiniest fraction sharp. But the thing about this is, it's subjective, because everyone frets the string with a slightly different pressure, and any individual frets the string with a different pressure each time. So you can never guarantee some objective, dependable result. So I'm hearing tiny clicks from the string trees, which I'll put some, last thing I'll do when I do some graphite under the nut, in the nut slots, I'll do a little bit of grease under string trees. Now according to that, they're a fraction sharp, so I'm going to pull back on the D and then the A and the E in sort of sequence and see if they bear out to be correct. They tend to go in, well, they almost always go in sets of 3 and a fairly predictable intonation pattern, and if you get one right, the others tend to follow. Just checking to see if the tremolo plate's lifting off, which it isn't. If the springs weren't strong enough, or they weren't screwed in far enough, you might find that on bending a string the plate rises and the whole lot goes out of tune, which you don't really want, so you might want to go and at that point you might want to tighten the springs up to hold the plate flat against the guitar top. one quick last thing. I'm going to just retweak or tweak the action one final time before I stop, and then the only other thing after that will be to do the a little bit of grease under the what sits up there, the string trees. Okay, so we are really at one point. Give me a light, Joanna. That's low. That's low, man. That's exactly one. That's one. That's just over one. That's creeping under one. Let's add a little bit of height to that one. Just over one. Tiny bit low. No, that's the wrong way. Dough. Get it right. Tiny smidgen of a lift on this one, on one side. Last little bits of tweaks. Don't break. Tiny bit of grease under the thingies and a bit of thingy under the graphite under the what's it, but I'll do that later on. I'll hang this up now. So there we go, from 3.25 millimeters at the last fret to 1.25, something like that. So we've dropped it by 2 millimeters, which is a huge amount. Looking at the position, we've got way too close. Looking at these here, way too close on the middle pickup, so we've got to lower that somewhat. We're okay on the top one, and we're way off, miles away on the humbucker. So what I was noticing that was when it switched to the humbucker on its own, we lost loads of volume, and it was in fact louder in the middle, which is right because the middle was much closer. So there we go. That will actually improve the balance in the pickups now. Oh yeah, everything done. I'm going to hang her up. There you go. Sorry, you're looking in the wrong direction, my mistake. Squier Affnity Strat, HSS configuration, setup done, frets levelled, neck re-polished or frets polished, neck oiled, first fret action lowered or nut action lowered, whichever you want to call it, pots tightened up and blown out and sprayed, polished up a little bit all round, and just ready to get the covers on the back and a little bit of the old lubricant stuff. One of the things that I often go on about, it's worth mentioning again, is if you're trying to get tuning stability, make sure you do all that it takes with the nut slots and with your strings to get the thing playing and staying in tune. Don't try throwing on loads of concoctions into the nut slots to make it stay in tune. It won't work. It'll maybe help, but it isn't what's going to make it work. And as soon as that stuff dries out or runs out, you'll be out of tune again in seconds, because the strings will start sticking again. So there's no cure like getting it right in the first place. So make sure that you get your nut slots cut to the exact correct dimensions. The other thing is, just there's a little tiny, I don't know if there's any left in here, there's a little tiny bit of paint graze on the body of the guitar here, and I'm going to get a bit of this scratch remover stuff on it, and presto, it's gone. It's usually from banging against the table or something. Hurrah. Right, ta-da, gone. There we go. Squier Affnity Strat, beautiful beast, one set up, very easy and pleasant to set up. Thankfully, I enjoy those. Very rewarding too, because you get a great guitar out of an average guitar. So there you go. Thanks for spending time in the shed. I'll see you again soon, and I hope you don't take too much offence at me bending those strings like that.